Welcome to Perspectives El Paso. I'm Professor Leon Blevins, Professor of Government at El Paso Community College. I want to begin today's program with just a little bit of history about my situation of coming to El Paso Community College, and then I'm going to introduce our guest, our special guest. About 1971, I was in Amarillo, Texas, and I was teaching at West Texas State University in that area, and I was reading in the Congressional Record an obituary of a man named Joe Yarbrough that I had known and actually worked for here in El Paso back in the 1960s, 65, 66, 67, somewhere in there. And in the obituary it mentioned that he was on the Board of Trustees of El Paso Community College. I didn't know there was such a thing. So I contacted someone here in El Paso, was recommended to teach here, ended up being employed. Then one day I was in my office, about 1971, and a colleague came to my office and said, "Did you see this morning's Amarillo paper that Preston Smith has vetoed hundreds of thousands of dollars for the college you just signed to teach at?" And I read the article and I was somewhat shocked. So I communicated with people here in El Paso and was told that the voters here had created the college, elected a board of trustees, and then voted against taxes to pay for the institution. And the governor said if the people of El Paso don't want to pay for this institution, the state taxpayers should not be paying for it. So I ended up coming here in a very uncertain situation, and as I was driving into El Paso, I heard on the news that the bond issue had failed and was fixing to take place, and the voters were calling in and wanting it to fail, and it did fail. So we had to wait 2 more years to vote on this college's existence. So I can look from back then up to this time. My perspective is from 1972 until today, 2009. The gentleman I have on the program today is new to El Paso Community College, and he's working as a marketing specialist for us, but he's been in El Paso a long time. His name is Jim Heiney, and Jim is going to bring some perspective from here, looking back and what he's found out about us. Jim Heiney, welcome.
Thank you very
to
much for having me.
Perspectives El Paso. Glad to have you
I respect you very much and very glad to be on your program.
You've told me in the past that you watch this show on a fairly regular basis. In fact, Jim, you called me and asked me if you could be on the program. This has happened to a few people. They've contacted me and said, "I want to be on your show." Why did you want to be on my show?
I wanted to be on your show because I wanted to talk about what a great place El Paso Community College is and the rich history that it has. I just started here in April, and one of the first major projects that was handed to me, well, actually, first let me say that to learn about the college, while I was sitting in my office on my first day of employment here, I go onto the computer, onto the epcc.edu website, and clicked on history to read about the history. And I noticed the first line says it was created by a vote in 1969. So a trigger went off in my head going, that's 40th anniversary stuff. Right. And so from there, it rolled to talking with one of the people in the president's office here, and things started to roll, and I began to research the history to do many things with it, from come talk to you about it, we have many things on our website about it, just to get the word out about the history and how great the college is. And a 40th anniversary is a great milestone to talk about.
Now, you come from media. Tell us a little bit about your background in media in El Paso.
I've been in media in El Paso for more than 30 years, from broadcasting major at UTEP, more than 20 years at Channel 4, the second half of those moving into the PR marketing side of things, where I started off in production. And then the last 5 years I was at KCOS Public Television, who's housed right next door to where we're doing this interview. And so I heard about this job in marketing, and from the day I walked in the doors here to KCOS here in this building at the Administrative Services Center, I just thought, man, this is a great place to work. And so this opportunity happened. I applied for it, and luckily I was hired, and now I'm here.
So you just moved down the hall.
I just moved down the hall, basically, right.
Well, we're glad to have you aboard.
Yeah.
We certainly are. Okay, now that you're here, tell us about some of this perspective of history that you've been discovering. What have been the most fascinating things you've uncovered? You're kind of like a detective. What did you uncover?
Well, you went to the main point right in your introduction, was that the college was voted for, but no money was voted for. And that is just a remarkable thing. And that showed, it put up a red flag on a law in Texas that later on, a couple years down the line, the college, along with another entity here in Texas went to the Supreme Court to have changed, where if it's a tax, only a property owner could vote for it. And I'm not sure how many other communities, states around the country even had this law. So that was a remarkable thing, and a lot of people don't realize that El Paso Community College is there in the history of the Supreme Court because we were part of a suit against this law, and it changed, and it allowed monies to come in to the college after that.
Right. I think I want to share a little bit of information on that. Of course, I'm a teacher. This is not a teaching class television show. This is basically a conversation show. But I did pull up some information on that because I was deeply involved in the bond issue September 1974 under that law. Under that law, you had to be a property owner to vote in a local property tax bond issue. Non-property owners could vote also, but their vote did not count the same as property owners. You had to win a majority of the property owners' boxes, and if you won the non-property owners by majority, you didn't win. As it turned out, Blaine Nelson, I want to give a little credit here. Blaine Nelson he teaches government still here at Community College. He coordinated countywide that particular bond issue election. I worked the East Side coordinating that East Side. Margaret Langford, a political science teacher, had been on the board. She coordinated part of it. And here are the numbers. Listen just briefly to these. In the property election for a maintenance tax for this college in 1974, the property owners voted 9,614 yes, no, 9,734. So they won by 120 vote. The non-property owners, the vote was 2,026, no 370, for 1,656. In other words, 1,656 renters voted yes, we want the community college and a tax to pay for it. The property owner said no, just by about 120 vote margin. So we were told we lost. So Ed Dunbar and Mark Berry, lawyers for the college, attached the case, got the Supreme Court to accept it, to a case from Fort Worth on a similar bond issue, and it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court overturned this law. We and our lawyers were arguing, we non-property owners at that time renting were taxed by pass-through. The rent went up if the taxes went up. So we really were paying taxes as well. So that was the basis of the Supreme Court decision. We made history.
Yeah, and that's something that people might not know.
Right.
That we were involved in a Supreme Court decision that changed a law in the whole state of Texas.
Right. Okay, what other fascinating thing did you find out about?
Well, just the whole history of the early days that people don't realize how many people were involved. The first class, I should say classes, were held in the fall of 1971, spread around different high schools. Only evening classes, obviously, because high schools were still in, and because they did not have the funds to, have a campus of their own because of this bond election problem. But it was a whole series of events from mid-1964 on till there before the classes even started. I wanted to give say something nice about Dr. Ray Small, past professor at UTEP, then Texas Western College. He was one of the people in 1964 that had the foresight to, hey, we have to do something here. We have to get people prepared for the next step, UTEP or, graduate colleges or whatever. And along with a lot of business leaders, they sat down and started to figure out what do we have to do. And the next step after that was a very important man who is still luckily with us, who was just here at the school a month ago, Senator Joe Christie. He was the next person who just is a star in my eyes of getting this college off the ground. Through his work at the Texas State Senate, he was able to find ways to get monies for us after the college was created, but no taxes were done. He worked with people in Austin and found ways to get classes started. And if we had students here, then the state would give us funds based on how many students we had, and funds would come in. So he was able to, even very grassroots, but get things starting to go. And then luckily, thanks a lot to another person, very important, the first Board of Trustees Chairman, Joe Foster, who had some connections with people at Fort Bliss that got us our first campus the following year in 1972 at Logan Heights. And so those three people to me were just, the most important people in this whole process that got the ball rolling.
When I asked Joe Christie at some point, he was running for a statewide office about that time also, and I asked him, how is it that the Governor Preston Smith vetoed this money and you're still able to operate? And he said, well, we hid money in several places in the appropriation bills, and he found some of them, but we still were able to get some of the money. Plus, eventually, some trade-offs were made with our state delegation in Austin, with some legislators from other places, like Lubbock area. You vote for my projects and I'll vote for your projects. So they were able to finally get some people to vote for El Paso Community College funding.
And another thing that I was not aware of until we had a function in August, it's called the General Session. People not in El Paso Community College wouldn't know what that was, but it's where they welcome back all the teachers. We have a little luncheon, speeches, and a good time for everybody, to get everyone juiced up for the coming semester. And I got to meet for the first time Arturo Lightbourne, who wasn't on the original board, but he was on the second board. He came on in 1971, and he told me a story of, even though it was a small amount of money, all 7 members of the Board of Trustees took out $5,000 loans for money for the college, and he told me how angry his wife was at him.
That was a lot of money back then.
Because he said he was only making around $10,000 a year. Right. And there they all were taking $5,000 out. So even the Board of Trustees took money out of their pocket just to get those first, and it was 901 students in 1971, spread over 6 high schools around the city where the first classes began.
That's what I call vision. They had vision of what could be done. A number of us also were involved at some point, I think it's 1976, as campaign managers for Arturo Lightbourne and a man named Karam and a man named Prendergast that were running for re-election to the board. So a number of us were involved. One day, one of my colleagues, she asked me this question actually. She said, aren't you excited about teaching at a new institution and you can become a part of it from the foundation? I came the second year of actual classes. I said, it is very exciting, but it also was a matter of growing pains. You want to talk about some of the growing pains you discovered in your research?
Well, the growing pains that I really discovered, first of all, of course, was that first year. They had small offices in the back of Thomason Hospital where they were actually housed in the nursing facility where in years past, nurses could live on the hospital grounds, and that no longer was used. And so that's where the offices were. And stories from an employee who's one of the oldest working employees here, Julie Bustamante, who started in August of 1971, before the first class even started, in the offices over there, and how their complete filing cabinet system was an expandable cardboard thing on a chair. And that was the complete files of all the faculty and staff of the college was just in that and was sitting on a chair. It wasn't even a filing cabinet. Other things that were interesting that I found out in my discovery was the Logan Heights facility by itself. How, first of all, when it first opened, everybody was just so happy. Finally we had a campus. That was a deterrent to people registering, going, you don't have a campus. How do you have a college? Students didn't understand. So first of all, having that there, but talking with a lot of people who were there since that time, their memories weren't of education, weren't of people there. Their memories were of rocks.
The rock.
I've had more people talk to me about rocks. Right. Breaking heels, and just because of the lay of where Logan Heights was, it wasn't meant to be a college campus.
That's close to where Chapin High School is
today. Right. And having to walk on rocks, and that was a big, big thing to them, something they didn't like. And so finally, I think the rocks played a very important role with the bond election because it got all the students, all the faculty, all the staff out there beating on doors.
They were ready to work.
Because they wanted a real campus.
That's right.
And so it's funny to say, but rocks played an important role in today's El Paso Community College.
I think a couple of those also, you told me in your office recently, they also talked about streakers at Logan Heights.
The few people that I've talked to from back then, that's also a common thread. That was the time back in the 70s when that was a popular thing. There was a hit song on the radio, and people were taking their clothes off all over the place. And there was one event, I'm sure it happened more than once, but there was one organized event done by some students where they all crowded into a van, opened the back door, and just started to go. But it's funny how the administration knew about it, but didn't stop it because, everyone knew about it, office workers and things like that. And it was just a fun memory of the early days of, before, when
it was a lighter moment.
It was a lighter moment during a very struggling time where you're going into old Army barracks, trying to get an education. And, that has a lot to do with, how well you learn, your conditions, your surroundings. So, it's funny what employees from back then who are still with the college remember. It's not that person or that person, it's rocks and streakers.
Well, that's indelible with me because one day Dr. Dick Hardy that taught history and I were walking out of our building, and just as we walked to the curb, here was this van, the back door opens, and here come these naked men and women, young naked men and women jumping out and running down the street. And Dick asked me the question, do you recognize any of them? And I said, well, no. When I see them in class, they all have clothes on. I don't recognize them from the back. So that was a light moment in serious times and getting the college going. Did you find out anything in your research about programs being developed and the difficulty of getting programs developed?
Well, the one thing that stands out wasn't so much the difficulty, but probably the one program that started back in those days that led to the growth and the success of the college was the Allied Health Program. Right. And with donations from Project Hope, if people aren't familiar with what Project Hope was, it was an international organization where a complete hospital and all medical facilities were on a ship, and it would travel to poor and undeveloped areas to give medical attention to people. And I'm not sure who the contact was here at El Paso Community College, but they donated a mass amount of equipment to El Paso Community College, and also some funds, and this allowed them to acquire the building downtown, which is now the Rio Grande campus. I think it was owned by the El Paso Independent School District at the time, and got this building, and all that equipment went in there. And still to this day, that is the main area for any allied health, any medical programs that we have come out of the Rio Grande campus right now.
Right. I don't want to get a name wrong, but I believe the administrator was named Johnson, who came down, and she's told her story before in helping to put it together. If I got her name wrong, I apologize. But that was one that was going. What other areas did you find that you found fascinating?
There was a lot of behind-the-scenes work dealing with the Trans Mountain campus, which was very interesting. The land where the Trans Mountain campus is, this was right when they were first putting in the North-South Freeway there. And the area to the east of it was known as East Castner Range. It was still owned by the military. And then what is still there now is known as West Castner Range. And they had cleaned up the land enough. That's why you never see housing on the west side, is because they're still worried that there's unexploded ordnance there or whatever. But the east side, they cleaned up enough where people wanted to develop that land. And so it almost became a battle between the city of El Paso and the board of El Paso Community College to try to get this land. The city wanted to use it for something to do with monies they owed and trading land with land someone had up in Cloudcroft. And it was a whole mix of what exactly they wanted to do with this land to make money for it. And the community college wanted the land to build this campus, the Trans Mountain campus. So the city seemed to have the upper hand at the time. And so Joe Foster, the first Board of Trustees chairman, and Dr. Alfredo de los Santos, the first president of the college, got in with Hillary Sandoval, who was the head of the Small Business Administration here in El Paso. And luckily at the time, this was during the Nixon administration, and Hillary Sandoval was at the time one of the few Republicans in El Paso, because back then they were very few and far between. And so he was very good friends with Senator John Tower, the Republican senator from Texas. And they went up to meet Senator Tower and told him what they wanted to do. And he walked right in an office right next door to the military who had this base, and walked right in and said, El Paso Community College is getting this land. And the city was out of the picture. And we acquired that land that is now Trans Mountain Campus. House of 5,000 students.
Yeah. But Dr. De Los Santos was able to get a contract with the U.S. Army to lease those barracks for like 5 years first. I think General Shoemaker was at Fort Bliss. And then we didn't have this building, the first building, the Valle Verde campus built. And so they got an extension for a couple of more years. We moved into Valle Verde, I think, in 78.
Fall of 78.
And it seems like that Governor Bill Clements vetoed some of the money for Trans Mountain campus. And they had to delay some of the putting of equipment into the building, partly. And
well, that's why it opened in 79, because the original plans in the mid-70s was that both campuses were going to open at the exact same time.
Right.
And so that's why Trans Mountain lagged a year. It didn't open until fall of 79.
Right. So we had a lot of struggles, and we had tremendous growth because we were doubling population of students just in the first few years. Double.
Yeah, I think it was not, the first year was 901, and by the second year it was already slightly over 3,000. It was even more than doubling that first year. And now today we just, if you saw the article in the paper, this semester, our 40th anniversary semester, we had the largest increase of students from year to year that the school has ever seen, 13.7%, and we're up to over 27,000 students, credit students here at the college.
Right. Do you have some other events planned for this 40th anniversary?
The big event that we're going to have that's going to tie everything together is kind of a look back at history with the birth of something new. We're inviting back many people that have to do with the history of the college, ex-board of trustee members, ex-presidents. They're all going to take part in the grand opening of our culinary school. This year, they're just finished construction over in the other building here at the Administrative Services Center. Our culinary arts program, $5.1 million design, and they're going to operate their own, I like to say, I don't know if it is their own 5-star restaurant.
Right.
It's called 1309, and the grand opening for this is in the end of October, and then it'll be open to the public Tuesdays and Thursdays for lunch and dinner, and it'll be an elegant, it's very elegant. There'll be an ice sculpture always on display. And then, well, at least for the grand opening, you'll be able to go through and tour. There's kitchen after learning kitchen, and also with a studio where they can do demonstrations where students in other areas can watch. And it'll also be a multi-purpose studio where other departments of the college can go in and do demonstrations. If the automotive department can drive a car and put it there and show students how to, how to fix their car.
You should have seen the first automotive department. I donated an old 1958 Ford to them, and they were excited. They had a car to take apart and try to put it back together. In one of those places they used to work on Army tanks or something. That's how primitive it was.
Yeah.
So we stand on the shoulders of giants, those men that you mentioned a while ago, the people that started it. And here we are today with what you're talking about.
Right, right. And so that's our big event coming up. Is it's going to be kind of a 40th anniversary, and then the look at the future with one of our bigger new programs, because the culinary's been there for many years, but it's a very small, very cramped, and this is going to be one of the best culinary arts programs within thousands of miles of here. It will battle Scottsdale Art Institute, which is one of the more famous ones in the Southwest. It will just, I mean, it is a remarkable thing. It's a lot more than just a community college cooking class.
Just recently, I was in Burgess Homecoming Parade as Uncle Sam. And as I made that route, I saw Arturo Lightbourne, in fact, watching the parade go by. And a number of students were shouting out at me saying, "Mr. Blevins, I'm a teacher now, I'm a teacher now." And at the beginning, at the end, 2 students had come up to me and said, "I'm now a nurse." And I said, "Look, I just had a little bit. You might have been with me 1 semester or 2 semesters, but there were a lot of other people that laid that foundation for these kind of students." That's what it's about, isn't it? They're our best marketing tool.
Oh, yes. Well, to give you an example of that too, is one of the things that I've been doing is I've been interviewing, as I've talked about, interviewing people from the past, but also I'm interviewing people present and the future. And we're going to have a series of little interviews that are on our website, epcc.edu. You click on the 40th anniversary, and there's already a couple of them up there. But one of the people I interviewed was a young woman named Violeta Chavez, who's the daughter.
She was one of my students.
And she mentioned you as one of the most important people who she took as a professor here at the college. Now, she went through the whole shebang here. She was involved in our children's college, where we have students between 5 and 17 can come and take fun classes, but in a college setting, so it gets them used to it. Right. She was involved in that, went here to EPCC, went to UTEP, and then went on to the University of Texas at Houston's medical facility, and now is a doctor of biological sciences, I think it is. So she grew up at this college, and when I asked her about professors, and she mentioned you.
Oh, that's good. Her mother was also one of my students,
Right.
Paula Chavez, who works at the college.
Works here, right.
Well, our time is gone. What a fascinating discussion from a man working for us today, looking back and sharing with us what he learned about us. Thank you very much for being here. We will do some more programs on the 40th anniversary of El Paso Community College before this next year is up. Thanks for being with us, Jim.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Great to have you here. Good luck with your job.
Thank you.
Tune in for another program in the future.